now like to welcome the opposition leader, Gemma Buckley.
Ladies, and for the first time, gentlemen, we think that the power of the word slut comes not from the word itself, but comes from the actions that follow that word, comes from the intent when that word is said. And we think the fact that more women are going to say this word, that more women are going to embrace this word, doesn't in any way affect how a woman is going to feel when a man who thinks her behaviour is despicable uses this word against her. And we think that was the real problem with the opening government in this debate. They could never tell you why, if somebody really meant the things behind this word, they wouldn't still be able to get that meaning across in an incredibly clear way with their intent. I'm only going to deal with one point of rebuttal because the rest of it will be integrated. And that's about whether or not this helps the feminist movement stay relevant. Nish is going to bring you a whole lot of positive on this. But in short, we think a couple of things are true about feminism. First of all, that this splits the feminist movement. What we heard from Nina just then was this going to lead to a really healthy debate amongst feminists who really dislike the word slut and really think they should embrace the word slut. We think in actual fact what this is going to do is lead to infighting and bickering about what the actual feminist agenda is, while a whole lot of traditional feminists think that modern day feminists don't give a crap about what women had to suffer through and about the victims of crime and people who actually are affected by the word slut. We think this actually leads to a significant amount of infighting. And the problem with that, Madam Speaker, is it leads to divergent interests. It means that you're now pursuing two different types of feminism. You're pursuing two different types of goals. We think, secondly, that feminism on the whole has a bigger agenda than to own back the word slut. And that is practical realities for women in today's society, which is not being paid equal amounts, not having access to the same practical things in society. And we think that them getting caught up talking about whether or not owning back slut is helpful is actually not ever going to be helpful to that. You'll hear more about that from Nisha. So I'm going to ask two questions which deal with the rest of Nina's material. First, I'm going to tell you why words that are negative in meaning are going to retain that meaning even when these words are embraced by the female community or the feminist community. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about why this will normalise the use of that word and why that actually undercuts the push to actually engage in discussion with the people who use this word in order to try and harm women. So first, let's talk about whether or not the push to try and own back the word can ever really be successful. Because we've seen other communities attempt this, ladies and gentlemen. We've seen the African American community attempt to own back nigger. We've seen the gay community attempt to own back queer and faggot, and we think it has failed on the whole, Madam Speaker, because those words are still used in an incredibly negative way by certain sectors of the community. We think just because now two gay men can say, hey faggot to one another and have a bit of a laugh, that doesn't change the way that word is interpreted when those people are being bashed and the word that follows that bashing is faggot, Madam Speaker. We think they need to tell us from government why you'll actually ever change the way people relate to and interpret this word when it goes along with the type of actions that are most problematic and most harmful to these types of communities. Because we don't think it's the word itself that has any power or any meaning. We think it's the intent. We think it's the circumstances in which that word is used. And we think it's things like the tone of voice and the level of aggression that follow the use of these types of words and these types of accusation against people. We think that in reality, just because this word is now used by a significantly large number of people and is used in a more casual way on a day-to-day basis doesn't change how it's going to affect people in those types of circumstances. In the circumstances where it really could harm a woman and her self-esteem. In the circumstances where it really could be actually important to what this woman is likely to choose in her life. We think that is problematic. But we secondly think that the types of associations people have with these words come from particular circumstances which are unlikely to change. You don't get rid of the idea of what a slut is just by not now being able to describe it as a slut. What Nina told us is it becomes harder to describe the characteristics of a person if now slut has a whole lot of different meanings. We think that's incredibly untrue. We think to the extent that more people will use it, it will still be clear to most people in the community what people mean when they refer to somebody as a slut. It's a set of characteristics that you're ascribing to a person. We don't think those set of characteristics are likely to change, even if more people actually use that word. So we don't think the meaning of the word is going to change. We don't think the harmful effect of the word is going to change. We just think this word is going to be used more, and that is harmful. I'm going to move on to that now. We think this normalises the use of this word in the community, which does two harmful things. One of them Nisha's going to talk to you about, which is about victims of crime, who actually are the ones who are most likely to have negative connotations with this word. But I'm going to talk to you about why we think this actually undercuts the move to engage with the people who use this word and to actually have realistic discussions and dialogue with those people about why they feel this way. Because we think, in reality, when people who hate women can get up in the community and call them sluts, because now this word is used on a day-to-day basis, now it's embraced by everybody, so they're never going to be called out on it. We think they will continue to use it. We think they'll probably use it a significant amount more. But the only difference the government can provide you in this debate is people are going to be less likely to inquire as to why they're calling a woman a slut. They're going to be less likely to actually try and deal with the motivations behind the use of that word. We think that's incredibly harmful in this debate. I'll take a point from closing if they have one. No? All right, Nina, you're in. Nina?
Okay. If your problem is that women are still going to be called sluts, why is it that you're still not letting them own that insult and not be ashamed of it when it's...
Because we're saying they're not ever going to own that insult, right? The reality is, in the type of context where this insult is going to be most harmful, which is like when a man is saying, you asked for it because you're a slut, we don't think the woman is ever going to interpret that word any differently, no matter how many other women use that word on a regular basis. So let's talk about the harm of this being normalised and people being less likely to inquire about the motivations behind someone using it. We think that means people stop engaging with those incredibly problematic views. But those views don't stop existing, Madam Speaker. Those views continue to exist in the community, that women are a lower life form and that these behaviours are unacceptable for women. But we think now women are less capable to actually call out the types of people that hold these views because they're just using a word that's acceptable for everybody else to use that's now normal in society. We think the best possible thing is that people take offence to the word slut and then they say to that person, that is unacceptable. Your views are unacceptable and the way you treat women as a result is unacceptable. The actual outcome of the government team's model in this debate is people can no longer do that as easily because that word doesn't now have the same meaning on the face of it. But in reality, Madam Speaker, it does. We think the biggest possible harm is allowing men and allowing individuals who feel this way about women to get away with using those words, to get away with letting them use those words in the exact same harmful way as they did before, but undercutting our ability to question those motivations and to say what they believe is actually wrong. We think that is incredibly problematic for women. We are very happy to oppose this motion.
We'd now like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister, Caitlin Gleeson.
Madam Speaker, the opposition got up here today and they told us that the one sole reason why we can't reclaim the word slut is because it always constitutes a single set of characteristics. It always constitutes the characteristics that a girl is easy, that a girl is, promiscuous, that a girl always has these negative connotations. That completely overlooks what we are saying on this side of the bench, which is that we are adding extra characteristics. By calling a girl a slut in a situation in which she has not been sexually promiscuous, in a situation in which she is not being condemned, in a situation which is not a negative one, then you are necessarily adding extra characteristics to that word and in turn taking away the taboo that they want to propose. I have two questions in rebuttal. First of all, this idea about intent, and secondly about the feminist movement. Now, firstly, onto this idea of intent. We were given this analysis from the opposition about how really it's not going to fix the social harms because when a word is used, when a male calls a female a slut, then it is always going to be a harmful thing. What we are saying on the government side of the bench is that when a word is used in many domains, as I flagged in my introduction, it is more difficult to express the clarity of the word. So the word queer is no longer used just to describe males who tend to like debating. It is also used to determine males who may have a wide range of different sexual preferences for another homosexual. It is used as a negative term. It is used as a positive term. We are never going to stand up here and say that there is never going to be any negative usage of the word slut. That is absolutely ridiculous, and we cannot do that. What we are saying is that we want this word to be used in positive domains more, because at the moment, under your status quo, under what you're defending, there are no positive usages of the word. So we are wanting to maximise this positive usage. Moreover, we would say that the more that a word is used, the less harmful it is, because the less it conveys this specific intent. The less taboo it is, the more dissociated it is. And we would point to the fact that, like, we on the government bench are very, very uncomfortable with using the word nigger. That is because the word nigger is not used frequently, right? As opposed to the word slut, which is thrown about a lot, which is now being able to be made less taboo. Gemma then got up here and told us about how, like, it's less likely to deal with the motivations of a man who says you did X because you're a slut. What we would like to say, that if you're talking about the crimes that it is associated with, we would much prefer to associate on the fact that the male is, like, date raping another female or exploiting her for her sexuality. That is the intent, which is always going to be there under every circumstance, and that is the intent we want to focus on, not about the word. Moreover, we would say that, like, if you're using it in the context of you did this because you're a slut, that is a negative context. What we are saying is that the word slut should not be used in every negative context, and there are positive contexts to use it in. Secondly, onto this idea about the feminist movement. So we were given this analysis from the opposition about how really, like, why is the feminism movement focusing on this? They should be focusing on other things. We were also told that there will be a lot of infighting. What we would like to say is that this already happens, because the feminism movement is one of the most divided movements, because they don't actually know which way to go forward, what they're actually wanting to focus on. That is why we are using the terms like first, second, and third wave feminism, right? Because you have multiple movements moving from multiple domains. But what we would like to say, 3 responses. Firstly, it's not a zero-sum game, and they're not mutually exclusive, right? So you don't have to be able to, like, focus on one aspect of female empowerment and not be able to focus on the other. Secondly, what we would like to say is it's simplistic to say that this is focusing on just a word, and that is not worthy of concern, because it is what this word symbolises, and that is why we are talking about it in today's debate. It is this negative oppression that we want to focus on, and it is this negative oppression which we want to remove the tool of these males to be able to use for females. Furthermore, we would like to say that if there are young feminists in this movement who think that this is worthy, who think that this is the new movement of burning bras or whatever, then power to them. Like, why can't they pursue this if this is what is the new version of males oppressing females? Because really, if you talk about it, it's just the new version of the context. If this is what the feminists want, then they should be able to do it. They should be able to remove this taboo, and this should be in their prerogative. I'll take opening.
Yeah. When a chauvinist man calls a woman a slut, do you really think she's going to be confused about the intent behind that word, even if you use that word to describe a whole lot of other characteristics?
And this is where all your analysis falls out of the debate, because we're never saying that we're going to cure chauvinism, right? But what we're saying is that when a chauvinist man uses the word slut to a woman, it no longer has the same resounding impact as it usually does. Why is that? Because like other people around the world at that exact same time are using the word slut in a different context, so it doesn't have the same impact. The same way as using the word queer today does not have that exact same negative impact as it did 2 decades ago, right? Like, it will still be used in negative context. We're not denying that. What we're saying is that it shouldn't be used holistically. Onto my substantive. I first want to talk about how, like, even if you don't believe in the feminist movement, even if you don't believe about that the word slut can be used in a positive way, it subconsciously keeps this feminist movement alive when it is being used. Why is this? Because people who may not believe in feminism, may not believe in these sort of agendas, are still reminded of the debates that arise when the word slut is used. Why is this? This is the fact that, like, in today's debate, we are standing here in the room talking about sluts, and the first thing that pops into your mind is the slut walk, right? The first thing that pops into your mind are those women who are congregating in hundreds and thousands, walking down the major streets of the cities, holding up signs saying, "I am an empowered woman, and I am empowered by my sexuality, and I am proud of that." So what we are saying is that, like, by adding these additional characteristics, which the opposition was so quick to dismiss, it actually promotes a great thing. So what does this do? first of all, it reminds other people of these characteristics. Secondly, it removes this impact, because when you use the word slut, it's not just you used your body, you're a negative person. It is also, there are other women out there who are proud of their bodies. So don't necessarily listen to me because I'm a chauvinist pig, right? And third of all, we would like to say that it has less impact because it has less usage. So like, if there's some chauvinist awful guy who stands out there and is like, oh yeah, you're such a slut, and it no longer has the same impact that it does anymore because it is used in both positive and negative contexts, then they're not going to use it as much, right? Because they're not going to be seen as such a great guy because they're just going, because it's just ridiculous. We were given this POI from closing off that why should sexuality be reclaimed? Because sexuality, let's face it, is always going to be part of a person's reputation, whether they are a male as a player, whether they're a female as a slut. So why can't females have this same prerogative, have this same equalisation? Why can't they be sluts? We're very proud to propose.
Now I'd like to welcome the Deputy Opposition Leader, Nisha Dutta.
They told us today that the aim of their case was not to change chauvinism. We told you that when you normalise that word, you have no way to question the motivations and the intentions of that chauvinistic man when he calls a woman a slut. How do you tell him that it is unacceptable to have those views about women when he might be using it in a positive context, but really you know he's not? We think that even if those positive messages exist, it is clear in that case when that chauvinistic man is screaming it in the face of a woman he's attempted to date rape, that it is not being used in a positive manner and that does not carry any benefits. I'm going to be looking at one point of rebuttal, mainly does this change the meaning and to what extent, and I'll be weaving in my rebuttal about the feminism stuff into my substantive. So, does this change the meaning and to what extent? So we heard from Caitlin that this adds meaning, that we're adding positive things in terms of like control and choice and things like that. We think that there aren't many uses that in which situations the word slut could be used in a positive term. They couldn't point us to one. We don't think many exist. We think there are far many uses for it to be used in a negative connotation. We think that even if you can add those positive benefits and those positive associations, we think that negativity underlying still exists. We think it still exists in all cases, and you particularly know when that is being used against you, that is being used in a negative connotation, that man isn't calling you empowered, isn't giving you choice, isn't saying that you're in control of your life. We heard that it confuses the underlying meaning, and we think that it doesn't, right? We've heard examples of how the word queer has changed. We think that when people use the word faggot, it is still extremely clear that that word has a very negative connotation. And we think that in the vast majority of cases, that connotation is being negative. We think the attempt to embrace that hasn't worked because that negative connotation still exists. We think even if you have both meanings, that negative connotation is still clear when it's being used in situations where it's actively and particularly harmful. I'm going to be looking at 2 points in substantive. Firstly, the active harm that normalisation has for people who have already been victimised, and secondly, why we think this harms the feminist movement as a whole. So firstly, the active harm that normalisation has for people who are already victims. We think that the use of this word actively harms a particular subset of people. We think the reason that the kinds of words like nigger, like faggot, and like slut have so much power is because they're associated with extremely traumatic events. We think that faggot is used as a catch cry of gay bashers. We think that slut is used as a catch cry of men who attempt to sexually assault women and then blame it on the fact that they were asking for it because it was a slut. We think that nigger is used as a catch cry of white supremacists who engaged in racially motivated bashings in the 70s. We think the normalisation of that word immediately makes those particular victims relive that event. So even if broader society has a more positive understanding of the word slut, even if broader society thinks it's not so bad, when you hear that word being thrown around on the street, When you're a victim of sexual assault and you're sitting next to two girls who are calling each other sluts because it's a throwaway word that they can now use in a positive meaning, we think that is incredibly traumatic for that person. We think it makes them relive that situation that they went through. It makes them relive the motivations of that man who sexually assaulted them. We think the normalisation of that word is incredibly dangerous. We think it takes them back to that gay bashing that they suffered through. It takes them back to that sexual assault that they suffered through. And we think that the casual use of this word is particularly harmful to this group of people. And we think that trying to embrace that word devalues that experience, devalues the fact that faggot is used as a catch cry of gay bashers, devalues the fact that nigger was used as a crash cry of white supremacists. It devalues the fact that men use the word slut as a justification for date rape and for sexual assault. And we think it's particularly harmful to hear that word casually thrown around for these people. So, secondly, moving on to why we think this harms the feminist movement. I'll take a point from closing if they have one. No, Nina. No, Nina, you're in.
Do you think there's a problem with the way that you're constantly connecting promiscuity with rape?
We think that connection already exists, right? And we think that is the biggest, we think that when you normalise that, that's even more, difficult because that negative underlying connotation never goes away. And so you say that, you devalue the experience of the people who have suffered rape at the hands of chauvinist men and call them sluts. We think that connection exists, it never goes away, and that positive benefit that you pointed to, even if it exists, will never get rid of that. So, why does this harm the feminist movement? We heard from Nina that it's a good, relevant issue for the feminist movement. We think it does two things. Firstly, we think it makes the feminist movement a joke when you prioritise something like this, as trivial as this. We think, when it's all about the slut walks and the right to dress promiscuously and the right to act promiscuously, we think that it's incredibly harmful when there are so many more practical and damaging issues facing the feminist movement at the moment, right? The fact that in the 21st century, we're still struggling, on average, for equal pay for women. The fact in the 21st century that women are vastly underrepresented in the upper echelons of corporation, in the upper echelons of government, in the upper echelons of business, right? We think that when you deprioritise that, that's incredibly dangerous, right? We think that it's incredibly problematic when in the 21st century women are still less equal citizens. And when Caitlin said it's a zero-sum game and that you can have all of these things at the same time, we'd say you can, but it's a matter of priorities. You cannot have everything at once and you have to prioritise some issues before others. We think that the bigger issues you need to prioritise are those pressing issues that shouldn't be existing in the 21st century where we're supposedly equal, and we think we should be focusing on fixing those. Secondly, what else does it do? We think it splits the movement, and we heard from Caitlin that's already happening. The feminist movement is vast and diverse and it's already happening. We think you make it worse under their side of the house, right? We think even the slut walks were incredibly divisive because some groups of feminisms didn't think that it was a good thing to embrace the word slut or didn't think it was particularly beneficial, right? And we think that's incredibly important. Even if some feminists already think that there's no value to embracing that word, we think you make that divide bigger, and we think that when there are so many issues facing that, you do need a united front in order to fix those. So we think that even to extend that split and that division already exists, you make it much, much worse. Madam Speaker, we pointed to active harms that this normalisation has to people who are victims and to general society and to the feminist movement. We're very, very proud to oppose.
We'd now like to welcome the government member, I believe, Joe Connolly.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the first half of this debate we think has been correct in discussing slut in the context of sex and discuss slut in the context of what it means for female sexuality. But we think that embracing the word slut and everything that comes with it does a lot more than just sex, because we think it's about aggression. We think it's about being proactive. We think it's about like asserting yourself in a way that the feminist movement hasn't answered to before. So we're going to broaden the scope of this debate to look at those concepts and to look beyond what it means in terms of just like female sexuality. But before I get on to that, two questions in the rebuttal. Because first of all we've heard from the opening opposition is whether or not we're actually going to be changing the meaning of this word, and secondly, what it's going to be meaning for the feminist movement. So let's look at their first issue about how the word slut is still going to have a degree of power and men are going to still be using it negatively. Like, to a certain extent, of course, that was always going to be true in today's debate. Like, well done for proving that maybe sexual, like, discrimination might continue.
Madam.
But what these guys missed is that we're not necessarily even just changing the meaning of this word. We're actually embracing and not being afraid to accept what that word means and not being afraid to be insulted by that word. Because what we're doing is in saying that it's okay to enjoy sex. It's okay to have a lot of it. It's okay to have sex if it means, like, just for the sake of it. Because they can say as much as they want that men are going to still be using it in an insulting way. What changes is that that isn't actually an insult. That isn't actually something that is all that bad. So we think that these guys need to engage with the fact that, like, embracing the meaning of the word like detracts that power necessarily, but much more so than on an individual level, because it's not just about helping individuals who are called sluts. It's about the direction of feminism and the way that feminism as a concept should go, and we think that is a much broader debate than the one that they're willing to have. We think that the bigger thing here is not making individuals feel better, but about owning those ideas about how women should act. And that's what our extension is speaking to. Owning the ideas about whether or not it is okay to act and to use sex in a way that is like powerful, to use sex in a way that men use sex. And we think that is much better than being scared to, like, for women to act in those ways that for decades have been okay for men. Yes, I'll take you now.
Yeah. Can you respond to the fact that normalisation will decrease our ability to question those men who do have bad intentions when they use these words?
I don't understand that, right? Like, question them if they're acting in an aggressive way. Like, you can still question them. Why do you have to just question them just because they use the word? But moreover, again, you're just focusing on, like, individual cases of men, individual uses of that word. It's much bigger than that. It's about embracing what that word means, embracing the direction of feminism as a movement, embracing why women should be able to have sex just as much as they want just because they feel like it. Like, it's bigger than what those guys in the debate that they want to have. From closing, we think what they're going to come up and say, because we heard this in their point of information on this, was that women shouldn't be labelled as sex objects. Women shouldn't be moving in this way. But we think, again, they're just fetishising female sex as if it's something different from male sex. We think that there is no reason why women shouldn't be able to like name and label them and have their identity formed in sex in any other way that men do at the moment. So we think the second issue of rebuttal so far has been about how it splits the feminist movement. And the discussion in the opening half of this debate is what the effect this has on the feminist movement itself. And like the different divisions and the different germane greens. No, thank you. What we're going to be telling you in closing is that we think it's much more important that we actually look at the people who are outside the feminist movement at the moment. Because the way that feminism is moving at the moment is that nobody likes it. It was an insult at the private girls' high school that I went to be called a feminist. That was an embarrassing thing because it was connected with hairy legs and hairy arms and no one wanted to do it. We think that people are losing the sense, and young women are losing the sense of the importance of feminism because they didn't grow up in a time where they had to fight for like basic rights. They didn't understand and don't remember the time before affirmative action. We think things like the slut walk are exactly the kind of thing that reach out to the people who are outside the feminist movement, who don't think that feminism is for them because they can get a job, they have equal rights, who don't think that issues of feminism are important. Again, that's going to be speaking to our extension about why this is much broader than just uniting or disuniting the feminist movement. It's about resuscitating it when it is in a serious danger of reclining. Like they wanted to say in their substantive matter that this is a joke. We should be struggling for equal pay. We should be like demanding that we do that. The whole point is you don't get that if you don't have women that are engaged and interested in making that battle. You don't get like people even thinking affirmative action is a policy that we should be having if you don't have a feminist movement that speaks to them. Only things like the slut walk speak to young girls who feel out of touch, who don't feel like their feminist leaders are speaking to them and are in touch with the way that they want to have sex, the way that they want to use their bodies. We think that embracing the word slut is much more important in bringing those groups into the feminist movement. So what are we going to be bringing you in addition to that in our extension? Well, we think that the word slut is not just about how women have sex, it's about how they act. It's about whether or not they can be aggressive. It's about whether or not they can be proactive. And we think that is much more important. Why is that? Because like being a slut is about having sex for the sake of it. It's about like asserting yourself and being proactive. And we think that the problem with the feminist movement at the moment is that it is incredibly complacent because women are like still seen as or still act in passive ways. They still don't assert themselves.
Madam.
No, thank you. So in relationships, you don't have women being the aggressive movers. But moreover, in broader areas of society, you don't have women putting themselves up to be like on corporation boards. You don't have women asserting and agitating in the way that they used to. And we think that this is an incredibly important way to battle that complacency about female behaviour more generally, because it encourages aggression, it encourages being proactive. And we think that like that complacency and that moving away from those sorts of that aggression is exactly the kind of insidious, problematic challenge that feminism truly faces today, because people don't believe it is an important struggle to fight. People think that anti-discrimination laws dealt with that problem, we can move on. We think it's much more important that we embrace those characteristics of being proactive, of being aggressive, which only comes when you embrace words like slut, when you embrace behaviour and all the connotations of the word slut, that we think you battle that complacency that is bringing down feminism and making people think that it's not a battle that they have to fight. These guys have to move beyond just saying that individual men are not going to understand the battle. It's bigger than that. It's about embracing the behaviour and the concepts behind it. And that sort of aggression and that sort of proactiveness is exactly what we're proud to stand on side government today.
We'd now like to welcome the opposition member, Christian Price.
Ladies, occasional male oppressors, what we're here to tell you from closing opposition is that by feminism focusing on a word, and on a word that's about the way that women conduct themselves in a sexual and in a physical manner, reinforces the view that women's sexuality should be and is a matter for public moral judgment or the judgment of any other person. We're here to tell you that they can't effectively ever change that stance by using the word slut, right? There are a number of reasons for that. I'm going to look at this in terms of two issues which will, like a pro, integrate my rebuttal and substantive. Firstly, what should feminism pursue with respect to female sexual behaviour and female appearance, and why is reclaiming slut the absolute worst way that they can do that? Secondly, I want to ask why this hurts feminism and women's causes generally, why this makes feminism seem increasingly irrelevant and not helpful to the actual real life issues that women face in the world today. On the first question, what should feminism pursue with respect to female sexual behaviour, and why reclaiming slut is the worst possible way to do that? No, thank you. What you heard at extension from closing government was that it should be okay for women to be sexually aggressive. Should be okay for women to be aggressive in their ordinary lives. We are obviously not denying those facts, right? But the word slut is not what makes society not accept those things. The word whore is another word you could use. The word hoe, the word skank, the word slurry, the word town bicycle. All of these are words that you could equally use, so even if they reclaim the word slut, right? The point is, it's not about the word. It is about the way that society interprets women, right? What do you do when you say we are reclaiming the word slut? You say, what happens when women stand out en masse in the street, dressed provocatively, and say, I am a slut, right? It says, it is okay for everyone in society to judge women based on their sexual expression, right? We say that is the worst thing you can do for those women. Moreover, we say what this does is plays into male stereotypes about the way female sexuality can and should be expressed. Slut isn't a word we impose on ourselves, ladies. Slut is a word that was imposed on us by men, and the behaviour that connotes a slut is a word that is imposed on us by men and by the porn industry. We don't think it is acceptable for women to then say, well, fine, I'll act in the way that those men expect me to act under those circumstances. We think that is what saying, I am a slut does. No, thank you. How can we say to men, it is unacceptable for you to judge women based on their sexuality if we are judging ourselves based on our sexuality and if we are judging other women based on their sexuality? It is impossible to do that, right? What should the feminist movement do? No, thank you. Because we can't reclaim every freaking word that has ever been used to oppress a woman, right? That's not possible. No, thank you. And I think it's interesting under this context that they're not arguing to reclaim words like frigid or prude, which are also words that connote a certain female sexuality that is becoming increasingly unacceptable in modern society. They told you they want aggressive women, but they're not trying to reclaim cunt or bitch. Those are words that are used to oppress aggressive and goal-oriented women all the time. They're not arguing to reclaim those words. Why? Because you can't freaking reclaim all of those words, right? What should we do instead then? We should try to send the message as women that you cannot and can never define us by the way that we behave. That is why every woman who is called a slut should say, you have no right to say that to me. Not, yes, of course I'm a slut. I'm happy to be a slut. Snap, snap. That is not the way to deal with being called that. That is not the way to do it, because it says it is acceptable to judge me and to judge other women, right? It might be okay for me to accept being judged that way, but it's absolutely not acceptable for me to say other women should be judged that way. That is not a decision that individual women are able to make. No, thank you. We say, moreover, even if they successfully diminish the meaning of the word slut, that does not diminish the fact that in society people will be being judged based on the way that they act and based on the way that they look. That is why side opposition is here to tell you that the message of feminism should be women can do whatever they want and you can't say whatever you want about it. It doesn't have a catchy name like slut walk, right? But it is a much better way to approach this situation. I'm going to talk about that more actually now. No, thank you. The next question we have to ask ourselves under this issue is, can the word be successfully reclaimed? The government has already told us that women are divided about this, that feminists are significantly divided about this, particularly sex-negative feminists who do not believe that women should accept the stereotypes put upon them by men and put upon them by other women who are sex-positive, right? So we say, firstly, it's very difficult. Secondly, the reaction to slut walk has not been for men who have called women sluts to be like, oh, I've been so wrong. It's for people who are on the street, even women, even people who just don't understand the concept, to look at those people and be like, oh, those women are sluts, right? Because they are calling themselves sluts and they're dressing in a way that they identify as sluts, right? People do not understand what slut walk is about. Firstly, because it garners so much media attention just for being a bit of a circus, right? Secondly, because even the people involved in slut walk have different reasons for their involvement in reclaiming that word. Some people are there, and I'll take you in a second, because they don't think it should be acceptable for women to be assaulted because they dress like sluts. That was why slut walk started, right? Because a police officer said, if you don't want to be assaulted, don't dress like a slut. Other people are there to say, it is okay for me to be confident about my sexuality. Those are two extremely different messages that they're sending, and it's very difficult to combine them. Shoot.
Men are also publicly judged on their sexuality in a positive way. Why are you denying women the same opportunity?
Oh yeah, I was going to get to that. Okay, because this is not judging women in a positive way about their sexuality. And we'd say that the fact that men are judged positively by their sexuality, firstly, we don't necessarily accept that that's a good thing, and we don't think we have to accept that that's a good thing on this side of the house. But secondly, the fact that there is no corollary negative word for men means that you cannot have the same discussion about men, because men are never publicly shamed for having a lot of sex. Men are often publicly congratulated by other men for having a lot of sex. We think that that is because the attitude towards those men is different, not because there are different words for those men. We think that's what has to change. On to the second issue about harming feminism and women's causes generally. The kind of women that are involved in slut walks are college-educated, well-off women who have never really faced institutional discrimination, have never been hit by their partner, have never not had child support paid for the children that they have with a man. These are women who are capable of focusing on this issue and capable of feeling empowered. This is also a very small number of women. What does that do? It means, firstly, slut walks can't ever be truly effective because they only reflect a small margin of people in society. And so you can't get a unified message, and you can't get enough people who really need to hear this message, out there. Secondly, it does not empower women who genuinely need the assistance of feminism, women who are being hit by their partners, women who cannot get access to justice, women who are not being paid the same amount as a man for their job. Thirdly, we say it's mutually exclusive with real change because it shows feminism is focusing on niche issues, and it takes up so much time in the public domain talking about slut walks rather than talking about how do we help the massive number of women that are being hit by their partners. We are extremely proud to oppose this motion.
We'd now like to welcome the Government Whip, Alexandra Downing.
Ladies and gentlemen, even though the purpose of second wave feminism in the 60s was to give women a choice of what they wanted to do with their life, rather than saying that women had to be career women, the focus of that movement was still on women being able to be career women. The reason for that is that even if we want women to have a choice, it makes more sense as a rights movement to stress the rights that we don't have rather than the rights that we do have. Yeah, we have the right to be frigid. Yeah, that's not an insult, but we'd also like the right to be a slut in today's debate. We'd like the right to be aggressive in today's debate. And we think that for things to not be an issue anymore, you sometimes have to make them an issue in the first place, so you get all the shit that men say about women out of the door so that you can focus on women having a genuine choice. Because in a context where we say, equality is kind of important, but don't defend an alternative, there is no alternative, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to look at two things in this speech. Firstly, why slut can be an acceptable term, but secondly, how it's really important for us to change the face of what feminism is. So we heard from the opposition that the best option in today's debate is that it suddenly becomes unacceptable to call a woman a slut. What we think that is that a concession that it is a bad thing to be a slut, and we don't think that it should be a bad thing to be a slut in today's debate, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that it should be bad to want to have sex. We don't think it should be bad to want to be aggressive about wanting to have sex. That is not something that we're okay with. But moreover, ladies and gentlemen, what the opposition missed in today's debate is that it is possible for the connotations of a word to change, even though the substance of what that word means doesn't change. So, for instance, all of the discourse about government 40 years ago was oh great, we're going to save the world. Nowadays, it's government is the worst thing in the world. We are still talking about the same things, but the connotations around that language have changed, ladies and gentlemen. That is a similar thing that you can achieve here. And we think that there's reasons why it can change. A, we'd say that just when slut is used more, it becomes less of a big deal. So when more and more people started having sex in the 60s, it became less of a big deal that people were having sex in the 60s. Similarly, when we think that more and more people are admitting that they're having sex, it becomes less of a big deal that you're admitting that you're having sex and being labelled as having sex. And so we think that in that way, the nature of a label changes. Moreover, ladies and gentlemen, we think the fact that the word slut gets embraced by respectable people means it stops being an unrespectable thing. That is something that the opposition hasn't been willing to engage with. What have we heard instead from the oppositions? We've heard that, but it can still be bad to be called a slut. What do we hear?
Madam.
We heard the idea that, but a woman will always be called a slut, and a slut will always mean that. We don't think they ever proved that the meaning of slut was constant. Moreover, we never claimed that we're going to fix every single problem with women's rights, right? We think that is a massive burden to give us in today's debate. But moreover, even if you don't change the intent of someone using the word slut, you still change the response. So if the worst harm they could point to was that someone will say the word slut and say it in a fake, joking way, that's a pretty shit insult, right? So we'd say that we'd wanted that kind of an instance, and that is a massive success for the feminism movement. Moreover, on their example of women being raped, being really offended by being called a slut, we say that a woman who is raped is probably not that offended by the word slut, but if she is, it's because the words The whole problem that we have with rape victims is that they're ashamed. They're like, I am violated, I am no longer pure. That is something that we need to change in today's debate, something that's been completely ignored by the opposition. Moreover, we heard from Kristen, like, why don't we also use the words cunt and bitch? I am very happy to call Kristen a cunt. I am very happy to call Joanna a bitch. I am very happy to use any of these words, and I don't have a problem with that. Finally, we heard the extension from the opposition that, like, female sexuality shouldn't be a matter of judgment. Firstly, it was unclear how they were ever going to achieve change because, as Kristen herself admitted, the slogan that she came up with, which was like, it's none of your business and equality is great, isn't exactly very original and isn't exactly very interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Moreover, we think that it is necessary sometimes to make something an issue so that it is no longer an issue. So as I told you in my introduction, the reason that women are now able to choose between being a housewife or going to work is that women fought for going to work, not that women fought for equality. And that is because you have to focus on the rights that you don't have rather than the rights that you do have. But thirdly, what we think that they ignored is that we just judge male sexuality as well. It just has different connotations. The response we got from that is, oh, well, we shouldn't judge male sexuality either. Ladies and gentlemen, your parents procreate and sex is a fact of life. And so the idea that we're going to stop judging male sexuality is frankly ridiculous. Before I move on to my second issue about changing the face of feminism, I will take a point of information from opening.
Yeah, do you think the victims of crime for whom the word slut represents an incredibly traumatic experience are going to interpret the use of that word any differently, even if the rest of society does?
Yeah, I think they do, okay? Like, they see a march down the street of people proud to be sluts, and suddenly it's a good thing rather than a bad thing. Similarly, the guy from the gay guy from a small town in America, who's always been told that faggot is a bad thing, goes to the big city, sees people marching for gay rights, and says, oh wait, it's a good thing to be a faggot. That kind of a thing changes the most for the victims out of anybody in today's debate. So why, ladies and gentlemen, do we change the face of feminism? What we pointed to you is the biggest problem with feminism is that women are passive, is that when women debaters get up and sound angry, they get into trouble because they're sounding angry, and women who sound angry don't get listened to because apparently it's a big problem. And we think that the big problem with women is that they have rights and they don't use them. That is something that we want to change. So why do we think that this will work? And why do we think that we're going to change how women are viewed and like the aggressive way? And why do we think it's a good thing that women will be viewed as aggressive? So why will they be viewed as aggressive? Firstly, because it's flashy and it's out there. It is women marching on streets assertively, exactly as happened in the 60s when women burnt their bras and did things that were really, really aggressive. That is how change happened, because they asserted themselves rather than being passive or engaging in like sophisticated academic discussions that are really, really boring for everyone else. Secondly, ladies and gentlemen, we think that it's aggressive just because a slut gets more people involved than other methods of getting change that they've wanted to. So the very fact that you have a much larger portion of the population participating in the discussion shows that there is a big female voice that cares about this issue. That is something that shows that women are willing to assert themselves in a way that is really important. But thirdly, what we think happens is that you get a new identity for women, which can eventually become equality. So we think that before gay men were able to identify as like normal people in heteronormative families, they first had to say, hey, it's cool that we are different and gay, so that people accepted them as being individuals. The idea that everyone should be the same is ridiculous. We think that we want positive identity rather than non-identity, because we think that that's just like a way more interesting work. Moreover, ladies and gentlemen, we heard from the opposition that, oh, this will be really bad for feminism because it divides feminism. Firstly, we say that feminism is divided either way, whether we do this or don't do this. Because if we don't do this, we are alienating a whole portion of society who would really like to be able to call themselves sluts, right? Secondly, we say that it is time that we reinvigorate feminism, I beg your pardon. Feminism has gotten really, really boring, and it's something we're fed up of. But moreover, in response to all of Kristen's stuff about how people won't understand the slut walk, firstly, not everyone has to have an academic doctrine to understand what the slut walk means, right? Like, I am a slut and I'm happy to be a slut. Secondly, it is fine for people to rally for different causes under the same banner. That is the very benefit of the slut walk, right? People can be marching for different reasons, but it's all to assert female sexuality. It's all to give you that aggressive view of female sexuality. We think that that's a really good thing. So, ladies and gentlemen, because in today's debate we create a type of assertive women that we need more of, we're very, very proud to propose. Thank you.
We'd now like to welcome the opposition whip, Emily Chaw.
Madam Speaker, a century of feminism has rejected the idea that women are something less than just three different orifices for male pleasure. We are not about male pleasure, we're not about reproduction, we're not about what we can do with our bodies. The opposition whip told us that we have to focus on the rights that we don't have at present. The right that we don't have at present is the right not to be judged based on our sexual behaviour, the right not to be termed or classified or treated differently because we're a slut or a slag or a hoe or a prude. All of those things are rights that meaningfully deny women the capacity to act in the way that they want and the capacity to act in the way that they deserve. Our extension has not been dealt with by the closing opposition. All of the material that Kristen brought out still stands about why even if we can reclaim the word slut to mean sexually empowered woman, feminists should reject it because it focuses on women as sexual beings for someone else's judgment. No, thank you. 3 questions. 1, whether feminists have the capacity to own, reclaim, or redefine the word slut. Secondly, whether embracing the word slut empowers women to own their sexuality in a meaningful way. And thirdly, what the effect of feminism specifically is on reclaiming the word slut. On to that first issue, and this is about can we even redefine the word slut. We think opening government set themselves a really low burden in this debate, right? Which was simply to muddy the definition of slut so it could at least sometimes mean a couple of other things. The benefits of reclamation and redefinition are therefore necessarily conditional on our capacity to redefine or at least challenge the meaning of the word slut to sexually empowered woman, because that's the only way you take the sting and the power out of this phrase. They said, at least when we use the word slut, men will think back to a strong woman like Lady Gaga or Madonna using that phrase. Hot tip, guys, men who care about what Lady Gaga or Madonna think, do not call us sluts right now. The kind of men whose behaviour and opinions you actually need to change simply, no thank you, do not care what feminists want this word to mean. When we use their word to define ourselves, we limit ourselves to how they see us as sexual creatures. That is offensive. Feminists should never do it. Even if we have a look at other more united and cohesive movements, right, like the homosexual movement or the black rights movement, for example, we say that it's really contentious whether or not they've been able to claim words like nigger and fag back. And when every single team in this debate has acknowledged how divided feminism is, we think it's really unlikely that feminists will be able to reclaim this word back. But, no thank you. And this is what we said in our extension that hasn't been dealt with. Even if we can reclaim this word, even if we can make slut mean something that it has never before meant, even if the meaning of the word slut can change, we should still never use it. Because what it does is it tells ourselves that we are sexual creatures. It tells us that we are only sexual creatures. No thank you. Because what slut means, even if it means sexually empowered woman, is people looking at other women and making judgments based on the way that they act. That is the right that we don't have at present, the right not to be judged. No, thank you, you undermined it. Second question, whether or not embracing the word slut means that women can own their own sexuality. This is the extension that we heard. They said that when feminists use the word slut, that sends the message that women can have sex as much as they want, they can be as aggressive and proactive as they want. What absolute rubbish. When women act in a sexually aggressive manner, or when women apply for the high job in the ballroom, they are still going to be called sluts and bitches and ballbusters. You don't do anything to solve that. But you actually also do an additional harm, because what you do is you say to society that, and I'll take you in a second, you say to society that women behaving in a particular way is something that we can generalise and make judgments about. Yes, please.
The judgment of women's sexuality already occurs every day. You do nothing to change it.
Yeah, the judgment...
What do you propose? How do you propose to reduce the power and validity of that judgment?
By not using the same word that they use to criticise us and demean us. Yes, women's sexuality is judged every single day, but we don't want women to buy into that argument. We don't want women to buy into judging other women by their sexuality. So we think what you do is you send the message that women's sexuality is still something that can be used to demean them, still something that can be used to criticise them when they do go for these ambitious positions.
They said, no thank you, change will only ever happen if we are particularly provocative, if we are particularly assertive, if we burn our bras in protests. But what that denies is the reality is that we live in a society where not everyone terms themselves a feminist. Not all women are happy to term themselves a feminist. So what you do is you alienate the people, no thank you, who we need to support us. You alienate older generations of feminists. You alienate women who don't think that reclaiming the word slut is the most important issue for feminists to focus on. And you alienate the vast majority of men who feel really uncomfortable with using this word. So we think that you undermine the capacity of feminists to achieve other meaningful change. And that's why Kristen told you about things like promotion and getting child support and why they're more important and how they're mutually exclusive, not dealt with. Third issue, the effect of feminists, specifically, no thank you, reclaiming the word slut. Because what they said is that when feminists reclaim the word slut is that we can change what the word means. The problem with that is that it buys into the idea that women are a matter for someone else to pass judgment on. It buys into the idea that there is only like some issues on which a woman can really be criticised, but her sexuality is definitely one of them. This might be a relevant issue for the people who sit in this room. It might be relevant to an educated liberal bourgeoisie, but for the vast majority of women who are denied jobs because they're pregnant, or who are denied child support because the government doesn't back them up, or who are denied the capacity to meaningfully engage with the democratic process, pursuing the word slut denies us other opportunities. But worst of all, when feminism is all about the right of women to do whatever they want and to pursue whatever opportunities they want, regardless of social constraints, we think the worst thing feminists can do is claim the word slut.